G'day gamers, Ranger Tony here with another Baldur's Gate tutorial video. Today we're going to look at a Cleric Creation guide. Just before we go into this, I'm going to give you the warning again. This is based on the early access content of the game. Some of this information may not be entirely accurate, but I'm doing the best I can to get this information as accurate as I can for you. So let's dive on in. Rightio, so we want to create a cleric, and by default you start the game as a cleric. So let's have a look at the class details and see what they're all about. Clerics are representatives of the gods. They worship wielding potent divine magic for good or ill. So there are 3 subclasses of cleric currently in the alpha, the early access content. There is the life domain. Think of this as your traditional healing cleric, okay? There is the light domain. This is a little bit more like maybe a paladin than a standard cleric. Not really, but it's because it's the deity, because you're going down this justice and that sort of path. It's sort of, to me, sounds a little bit more like a paladin. And then finally there is the trickery domain, which is to do with being wicked and chaotic and mischievous. Think of this as the evil domain. Now, what I will say about the trickery domain, personally, I wouldn't take it. And the reason I wouldn't take it is because you have a companion right from the get-go who is a trickery domain cleric. And so I would recommend you choose another domain, another subclass. You can choose not to have her in your party. You can leave her out and do whatever you want. But I like to have a spread of... in this sort of game, I like to have a spread of different characters. In some other games, I like to play all as one class. But in this situation... I think a good spread works well. So I would recommend a life domain or a light domain. You can then choose your deity. And as far as I can see, there's nothing that choosing a deity changes about your character build. It may have some effect in the game. There may be times when you come in the game and you're given options in interactions that will be based on what deity you choose. If you are completely new to Baldur's Gate and the Forgotten Realms, Faerun, Universe, D&D, whatever, I can tell you some of the deities that are generally considered good, right? So Solune is one of them. Shar is considered to be evil. Tempest is neutral generally, but he is, worshipped by, as a lord of battles. He has a lot of good. He has some evil as well, I suppose, but mostly it's good. And generally, a lot of paladins are devoted to Tyre. Think of him as Thor, basically. It's the same thing. Bane is an evil god. Helm is the sentry god, so he is another that is good to neutral most of the time. Merkel is one of the dead 3, so he's an evil god. Illimantar is neutral to evil, the god of suffering and the oppressed. Mystra is the good god of magic. This doesn't give you the ability to cast arcane spells, so be aware of that. Ogma is a sort of a neutral god of inspiration and invention. Kelemvor is a fairly recent god in the Faerun universe. Recent as in, 20-odd years ago, or nearly 30 years ago, I guess, someone came up with the idea of making him a god during... I won't go into it. Anyway, there was all this stuff that happened, which was like a couple of 100 years ago, game time, and a whole bunch of gods were kicked out of heaven, essentially, and some of them were killed, and Kelemvor replaced the god of the dead. But he is neutral, he's not evil. Baal is another of the evil gods. Moradin is a dwarvish god of smithing and stuff like that. He is usually considered to be good or neutral type of thing. Corellin Lotharion, I believe, is one of the good gods of the Elven pantheon. Glar Gittergold is a dwarvish god. I believe he is good or neutral. Yondala, halfling god, good or neutral. Lolth, evil god of the Drow. Ladugur is evil god of the Dowager, which are the grey dwarfs, the evil dwarfs. Valkith is the Lich Queen, who is the Githyanki deity. I'm pretty sure she is neutral to evil. Elestre, I'm not really all that up on, but she is a dark god of the Drow, so she's obviously a neutral, a bit more neutral than evil. And that's it. That's all of the gods that are listed. So you can choose any of those that you want. The game has no alignment system in it, so you can choose to be a follower of an evil god. You can choose to be a follower of a good god. It doesn't really matter. And as I said, it doesn't, at this stage, from what I can see, it doesn't seem to have an effect in the game what you pick. Spells and cantrips. I'll really quickly go through some of these and point out ones that I think are useful. This default set here isn't too bad. I never use guidance, but it does give you bonuses to ability checks, so if you know that you're going to have to do a strength check or a dex check or something like that, you can cast that on someone who's going to make that check. Light is probably a more useful one to light up the area if you're not playing a race that has infravision, darkness vision. Resistance gives you a bonus to save, gives one person a bonus to save throw for a short amount of time. It's okay, but I never really use it. Sacred Flame is the only one that I use, and that's your standard ranged attack for a cleric if you don't want to use a missile weapon like a bow or a crossbow. Thaumaturgy is okay if you're going to do intimidation stuff, so consider that, but it's up to what you want to do with your build. And then your first level spells that you can prepare for the day, they have taken Create Water, Guiding Bolt, and Shield of Faith. I would get rid of the Create Water and instead replace it with Healing Word, because you want as many healing features as you can get in this game. Halt is okay, but it only halts them temporarily for a single round. Bane is the reverse of Bless, which you don't have access to. So Bane is a debuff. The Create Water can be used to extinguish flames, so that can be useful, but that's the lot that I would go through. Shield of Faith gives you, it's basically like a shield, but it's a shield of force that hovers in front of you. And so that's that. Now, you're going to get 8 hit points per level, right? And you are going to... but you get an extra one here because your constitution is 13. You get divine spells. You get wisdom and charisma saving throws, proficiencies. Light, you can wear light and medium armor. You can use a shield, and you can use simple weapons. Now, you're going to start the game with... I think it's chainmail armor or something similar. It's an okay medium armor. It's not great, but it's better than nothing. You're going to start with a shield and you're going to start with a mace. Now, you can't use every weapon, so only simple weapons. You don't have to use a bludgeoning weapon, though. You can. There are some simple weapons that you can switch to. I think the hand axe, short sword. You could go to dagger. If you wanted to go two-handed, you could go... quarterstaff, I believe, things like that, and you can probably use at least the short bow and probably crossbows, light crossbow if you can find them. So that's that. Now, based on the subclass, there is the domains in here, there are some minor changes here. So as the life domain, we get 2 extra spells. Bless, which is a buff for your companions, buffs up to 3 of them, and the Cure Wounds spell, which is the one that you definitely want. You also get access to heavy armor. Did we choose the right one? Sorry, let me just quickly check. Yes, life. So we get access to heavy armor. You actually do extra healing when you use healing spells. So that makes you really useful as in the life domain. The light domain gives you access to warding flame. So you can basically shroud yourself with flame to help protect you. You get some extra spells. You can use Burning Hands and Fairy Fire. Burning Hands is a very good spell up close, at least early on. Fairy Fire, so it allows you to have advantage against any opponent that you light up with the Fairy Fire, and you automatically get the light cantrip if you didn't take it previously, and you also still get access to Bless and Cure Light Wounds. So it turns out that this light domain is actually quite good. The only thing you don't get is the heavy armor. You get some other good stuff in it. And finally, the trickery domain, rather than all of that, you get access to Charm Person and Disguise Self spells. You get the Blessing of the Trickster, which allows you to grant advantage on stealth checks to somebody, yourself or one of your companions, and you also get access to Bless and Cure Wounds. So yes, as I said, I would take Life personally, or Light. I don't tend to play Evil, but those are the 2 that I would take there. So that's an overview of the class. Let's have a look at what races work well. Now, unlike some other races, Wisdom is your primary attribute, as it shows us over here, and there's actually very few races that get any bonuses to Wisdom. In fact, the only ones are the Wood Elf, so the Elven subrace of the Wood Elf. They get a +1 to Wisdom, and Dwarves get a +1 to Wisdom. Gold Dwarves in particular. Shield Dwarves don't. So Wood Elves or Gold Dwarves would make okay clerics because they've already got that bonus to Wisdom. But in fact, pretty much any race will be good at a cleric. You, as a human, you get a +1 to every ability, and as a half-elf, you can add a +1 to 2 abilities, and so this one is doing it the same. So basically, Wood Elves, Gold Dwarves, humans, and Halflings are all going to be, okay clerics. But as I said, anyone can play a cleric. No one else has any real abilities that stand out to make you really good as a cleric, although I will say that the Shield Dwarf ability to... Oh, no, that only goes to medium armor, so that doesn't help. But you might be able to... I'm not sure if the Warhammer, for example, is available to clerics normally, so that might give you advantage there, and you've probably got access to long swords, which you probably don't have as... If you took elves, you'd get access to long swords, which you wouldn't normally have as a cleric. So races, it's not a big thing. I think for this, I'm going to pick a gold dwarf because I think they do work well. Origins, then. So there are several origins that do work well. Acolyte, of course, is the first one. If you've actually been an acolyte in a temple, then it makes sense that you would then eventually become a cleric. And insight and religion are good proficiency checks to take there. Anyway, folk hero is one that you might want to take, but it's not really anything that's clerical in nature. You could go noble again. Hermit, being religion and medicine, would be a good option, but how many hermit clerics do you see? It doesn't really matter, but it's up to you how much you want to roleplay. And that's, I think, it really. None of the other ones really scream out to me as being good for clerics. So I'm going to take hermit because it gives us that medicine and religion proficiencies. So we've done class, we've done race, we've done origin. Let's go and have a look at our abilities. So the recommended abilities have got you a little light on dexterity. Now, normally I say I don't like having a penalty on anything. In this case, I don't actually mind it too much. This is going to affect your armor class, but if you always wear a shield, it's going to correct that deficit. So it's up to you. If you want to make a change to anything, you could take 1 point out of Constitution because that's an odd number and put those 2 points. Oh, you can only put one of those in. You need 2 to go to there. So, yeah, you're probably best leaving it as it was. You could take the 2 points out of Charisma. But some charisma as the player character is a good idea in any game, really. So I'm going to actually leave that default build. You can do multiple things with a cleric. You can go in with more strength. This one's got quite high constitution, partly because they're a dwarf. So if this is now going to mean that you've got 12 hit points per level or 10 or something. That +2, you could wipe that out to be just +1 or even 0, and instead you might want to go more strength and more dexterity. It's entirely up to you how you want to mix those around. But I actually feel this recommended setup is pretty okay for what you can do in this game. There are limitations. You can't create anything naturally over a 15. So this is a pretty good setup. So finally then, we look at skills, and you get 2 skills that you can choose. Now, based on the class options that we chose and the race that we choose and the origin that we chose, this is what it's giving us. We've got medicine and religion based on our origin, and we can also be proficient in history, insight, or persuasion. The 2 that I would really recommend out of those for this character would be insight and persuasion, because those are things that you're going to use more in the game. I haven't seen any history checks yet, and even if there are, they don't feel as important to me. Being able to persuade someone or being able to recognize that someone is being deceitful or something like that, I feel is more useful than a little bit of arcane knowledge along the way. So that's the basis of the build. How do you play the character? Well, you really shouldn't be a frontline fighter. The fact of the matter is, if you've played the game as any other character, you'll notice that Shadowheart, the cleric that you can have in your party, gets attacked a lot. The AI in the game targets spellcasters and targets them really savagely. So you don't want to be in the front line. You want to keep yourself buffed in any way that you can to keep yourself protected, and be prepared to chug potions, eat food, do whatever it does to keep your hit points going so that you can move around in combat and help your companions, because that's what you're there for. You're the glue that holds the party together. You're the healer. You're not a tank. You're in there to heal and occasionally do some damage or debuffs from a distance. That's really it. I have found that I rarely get the cleric Shadow Heart, is it? Yeah, I rarely get her into melee combat at all. She's back buffing and healing and things like that. So that's my Cleric Creation Guide. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please leave comments down below and keep an eye out for the rest of my Creation Guide videos. Thanks a lot. Bye.